Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ali again. Let's continue with plant tissue and organ. Okay, let's look at plant tissues. So, plant tissues are a group of closely associated cells that perform related functions and are similar in structure. I did mention this in my previous video. So, plant tissues can be categorized into three main types: ground tissue, vascular tissue, and dermal tissue. So, these tissues can be actually divided into simple tissue, meaning that they only have one type of cell, and also if it's a complex tissue, they can have more than one type of cells. Ground tissue. Okay, so ground tissue are tissues that are neither dermal or vascular. It can be divided into three types based on the nature of the cell walls. So first off is the parenchyma tissue, and these are cells with thin primary walls and usually remain alive after they become mature. So the parenchyma forms the filler tissue in the soft parts of the plants and is usually present in the cortex, the pericycle, the pith, the medullary arrays in primary stem and root. We'll talk about those later. And next we have the collenchyma tissue. So collenchyma cells have thin primary walls, but they have some secondary thickenings. So collenchyma tissue provides extra mechanical and structural support to plants, particularly in regions of new growth. And finally, we have sclerenchyma tissue. So if you look at that cross section there, the secondary thickening of the walls are much thicker. They have thick lignified secondary walls and often die when mature. That's why they have those lumens there. So sclerenchyma provides the main structural support to a plant, especially in trees. Next, we have vascular tissue. So vascular tissue is a complex conducting tissue. So there's more than one cell type and is found in the vascular of plants. And the primary components of vascular tissue are the xylem and the phloem. So, and of course, I bet you know this, these two function to transport fluid and nutrient internally inside the plant. And of course, there's actually two meristems associated with these vascular tissue, and this would be the vascular cambium and also the cork cambium, but we'll talk more about that later. So the cells in vascular tissue are typically long and slender, and since the xylem and phloem function in the conduction of water, minerals, nutrients throughout the plant, it's not surprising that their form should be like similar to pipes. So we have xylem that conducts water upwards, and then we have the phloem which conduct food downwards. And finally, we have dermal tissue. So dermal tissue functions to protect the plant from injury and water loss. So it's basically like a skin. So dermal tissue covers the outside of the plant, except in woody shrubs and trees which have bark or cork cells. The most common cell type in the dermal tissue is epidermal cells, and generally a thin waxy layer called the cuticle covers the epidermal cells to protect them. And other than that, dermal tissue can be specialized. So we have guard cells here. So guard cells surround the stomata, um, which are the openings in the leaves for gas exchange. So like I mentioned earlier, as the plant grows, the epidermal cells actually get replaced by cork cells. And then because the cork cells provide a thicker and more protective covering for a mature plant. Now that we know the different plant tissue types, let's continue and look at plant organs. So if you look here, so for plant tissues, we have our dermal tissues, our ground tissue, and also our vascular tissue. And for each of these cells or tissue types, they make up a plant organ. So plant organs consist of leaf, stem, and also roots and their modifications. And from here we have two different major organ system, which is the shoot system and the root system. The first plant organ we're going to look at are the roots. So roots are very important to a plant. They provide stability by anchoring the plant into the soil. The roots can store nutrients or storage for photosynthesis products, and also act as a primary source of water and nutrient acquisition by absorbing water from the soil and transporting them up into the rest of the plant. So there are three different types of root structure. A taproot, characteristic of dicots, is a single dominant root from which a smaller secondary root extend from. And then we have the fibrous root system. So this system composed of small roots, no single root actually dominates. And finally, we have adventitious roots, which develop from non-root cells. So typical roots contain three different sections or zones. So the meristematic zone, the zone of elongation, and the zone of differentiation. So we'll look into this further when we look at plant growth. Next, we have the stem. So in vascular plants, stems are the organs that hold plants upright, so they can get the sunlight and air that they need. Stems also bear leaves, flowers, and other secondary stems. So these structures grow at points called nodes, and at each node there is a bud of meristem tissue that can divide and specialize to form a particular structure. Another function of stem is transporting water and minerals from roots to leaves and carrying food from leaves to the rest of the plant. So without this connection between root and leaves, plant cannot survive high above ground in the air. So in some plants, a stem also store food or water during cold or dry season. So uh, there's stem shows a lot of diversity or variation because many stems are actually specialized. So we have some different stem types, including the bulb, corm, caudex, rhizome. Rhizome, I think people are familiar with. Stem, which is horizontal and underground, and then also tuber stems. So finally, we have the leaves. So the primary role of leaves are to collect sunlight and make food by photosynthesis. So there's a variety of types of leaves and how they look like. But all leaves have two basic parts in common. First, the blade and the petiole. So the blade of the leaf is the relatively wide, flat part of the leaf that gathers sunlight and undergoes photosynthesis. And the petiole is the part that attaches the leaf to the stem of the plant. So this occurs at the node. So flowering plants' leaves vary in how the leaves are arranged on the stem and how the blade is divided, the form and the arrangement of the leaves, how it maximizes light exposure, conserving water, reducing wind resistance, basically how it benefits the plant in some other way in its habitat. So there's a whole variety of leaf diversity. So that's all that I want to talk about with you today in this video. So I'll see you next time. Bye.